Hi everyone, welcome to today's lesson. We're going to be looking at shapes today. So that's something you've probably heard me talk about a lot in the past when I've been working pretty much with any video. They're a really important foundational aspect of representational drawing and painting. But I want to go over initially just kind of looking at shapes generally and their importance, but then also an exercise that you can start with straight away as soon as you start kind of practicing to draw in this manner. It's a really useful exercise for refining your ability to look at shapes and copy them in a really simple way. The other great thing about it is you don't need any reference. You can do it literally anywhere. So you could be traveling, you could be waiting somewhere, you could be doing it at home, you could be watching television. It's kind of something that you do with the sort of back of your brain rather than thinking actively too much about it. But you can really hone your drawing skills pretty quickly by doing a lot of these shape exercises. But to begin with, I'm just going to flip back a bit from my sketchbook. So I've got a few portrait sketches here, and one in particular demonstrates shapes really well. So if we look at this little portrait of a face, you can see pretty heavily outlined all of these dark shapes which kind of meet the light part of the face. So they're quite heavily outlined, so it's easy to see. You could divide these shapes into individual little groups. So here we've got this kind of slanting oblong rectangle, a kind of almost hammer shape here. So you can think about shapes as kind of objects in their own right. You can group them together and make them into bigger things. This might be like the open mouth of a creature. Something we did when I was learning was kind of think about what the shape could be if it was kind of abstracted from its surroundings. So I'm not thinking about what's the shape of this eye, I'm thinking about what's the shape of this shape. So I look for that shadow, or I look for this shadow, and I think about what its specific shape is. You can blur your eyes, which helps kind of dissociate a bit from the subject. But a lot of it's just abstracting, basically. So you're abstracting away from what your kind of preconceptions are about what the object is. So particularly when we're drawing something like a face, we have preconceptions about what a nose is, what an eye is, what the mouth should look like. And if you get caught up on that when you're first learning to draw, you'll find that things start to look a bit wrong, because rather than drawing what you see, you're drawing what you think you should see, or what you think how things should be, and that tends to be slightly wrong, slightly distorted from reality. So as much as possible, we want to kind of just focus on the visual reality of what's in front of us. And one really effective way to do that is to divide things into these light and dark shapes, and then just think about, kind of really focus. You can spend quite a long time looking at the shape. So if you kind of stare at a dark shape for a while, it sort of starts to almost hover off the surface of the paper, and it becomes a lot easier to draw. But yeah, it's really crucial, particularly when we're doing this sort of dividing light and dark, which is usually the initial part of any kind of our approach to any drawing or painting, because that gives us a platform to then develop form. And shapes, being able to kind of discern shapes and accurately draw them, is a really important skill to being able to do that in your artwork. So today I'm just going to go over what a shape exercise is. Basically, you just draw shapes and you copy them. So what I would usually do if I was to do shape exercises, and you can do it in any size sketchbook. This is an A4 sketchbook. You could be working bigger, you could be working in a really tiny sketchbook. But the general idea is you draw any shape you want down the left-hand side and you copy it. If you like, you could lift the shapes as they get more complex from portraits or figures that you have references of, because you will find kind of repeating shapes. So the shape of a shadow underneath a nose tends to be quite similar. So you could choose those to get familiar with the different shapes cast by parts of the body, or the negative spaces between parts of the body. For instance, when someone's in a standing pose and their legs are separated, you tend to get a similar kind of triangular, kind of curvy, triangular pointed top thing That's the shape between the legs. And it varies, but it's actually remarkably consistent the more that you draw it or paint it. Yeah, what I would usually start with when you're first doing your shape exercises is you're working in pencil. So I've just got a little clutch pencil here. And start with something really simple like kind of slightly not rectilinear, rectangular shapes, or triangles you could do as well. So something with just a few simple lines, 4-3 lines, all straight, all connecting in a fairly almost rectilinear way. So all you have to do then is copy these shapes. Now, one way, if you want to be really strict with yourself, you can tape a strip of tracing paper down one side of your page and draw your copied shapes onto the tracing paper. Then when you finish, you can lift the tracing paper off and see if it matches. I don't always do that, I usually just kind of go by eye as much as possible. But as we do when we draw, I'm just going to re-emphasize these so they're nice and clear for the camera. Like that, nice and dark. So if you want to start in the most basic way possible, we would draw one point for the top corner of that shape. Then I want to look for what's the angle down. So you can kind of ghost the line. You can look at it and try to figure out the angle. But generally just try to look for the same angle in between this little corner as exists there. You can be kind of ghosty. I always say be ghosty and sort of sketchy with your lines when you're first starting. Then think about what the length is. If you like, you can measure it. So you could take a little measurement with your pencil here. About there. Then look for the same, again look for the angle back. So I'm trying to make the line parallel to this line. So it's starting to angle back. Again, look for the length, but this time I'll just do it by eye. So that's the top and bottom of that line. This time it goes roughly straight across, and then this line would hover, something like that. So I can then emphasize this shape. And that's my copied shape. So you can see they look pretty similar. Looking at it now, I kind of feel I maybe made this one a little bit wider. So if I wanted, I could erase it. So if you want to make corrections to your shapes, particularly probably as they get more complex, and we're going to do some more complex ones in a moment. So yeah, let's shorten it a bit, and that looks better. So now if I look at them, they feel more similar. So you're just working towards refining that shape to feeling identical to the original shape. You can fill them in, makes them even more obvious. That's kind of what we would usually do if we were drawing something. It's got those shapes filled in now. So again, let's work with this little triangle now. We'll start with this left-hand point. So mark that on the page. Then we're thinking about what's this angle. Work parallel to that line. Not too bad up to there. Then look for its length. It's not too bad. Again, sketching down, looking for a kind of ghosty parallel line. Then parallel to that line again. You won't always be able to do this, use this kind of parallel trick, but for anything straight you can. And if you were working with your, say you had your portrait subject on one side of your paper as you're drawing, you can do the same thing. So you could look at your subject and make the line on your page identical to the subject, which is one advantage. When you're working from life, people often get a bit daunted by it, but in a lot of ways it's easier. So there we've got that one copied, so we could fill them in again. I'm reasonably happy with that one. Let's do this one now. So you should be getting used to the approach. So we've got our corner. Thinking about what angle this is. Thinking about how long that shape is. Then this one tilts back ever so slightly from being straight. You can also think about how these angles feel within the corners. Sorry about that. Had a camera malfunction and skipped ahead a bit there. So I'm going to redo another shape like this one. Make a slightly different one. So more trapezoidal, a tilted trapezoid. So I'll just darken that like the other ones were. So again, I'm going to start with 1 point. I can work the other way this time because I've been kind of working clockwise. We'll work anti-clockwise. So we've got a straight line that we can copy. It's pretty easy. Then look for the length of that line. Then, like I said with the last one before it cut out, we're looking for this angle. So think about what's the angle back, how acute is it, how obtuse, which really helps when you're doing kind of blocking in drawings, is just to think, should it be kind of like a sharper corner, like a pointier corner, or wider? Because generally our construction lines we try to block in a straight fashion for this reason, so it becomes easier to just kind of look, is that generally too tight or should it be wider? Or too tight or too wide? So I make sure this angle is the same. Then working up, we find this point up here. A short little line. Generally the shorter lines are easier to match. You can go over it. Maybe seems a little bit tall. So something's gone slightly awry. So make a correction and just kind of shorten it down a bit. Like that. That'll make that a bit thick. And then let's fill it in and have a look. But yeah, not too bad. It's a little bit off that one. The other ones are a bit better. So you basically, when you're starting, I recommend doing these kind of 3 or 4 line shapes using straight lines, nothing too complex. And then as you advance, as you do these over and over again, you find yourself being super accurate with them. You can make your shapes more advanced. But yeah, you'll be surprised actually how tricky it can be even to do the simplest shapes. But basically we're just looking for being able to copy the length of a line and the angle in between 2 lines. That's what we're starting out with. If you can do that, you can copy any shape pretty much verbatim. And it makes it a lot easier to draw from life if you can do that. Being able to do these shape exercises and then being able to kind of simplify your subject matter pretty much sets you on a really, really effective path to being able to draw realistically very quickly from life. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some slightly more complex shapes to copy. But you'll notice the approach remains the same. So let's do maybe something that looks a bit like the side of a nose. Kind of shape noses often make when you're copying them. So this is say the light direction is coming this way, and we've got a nose shape, a nose shadow shape on the page that we're copying. So we'll fill it in and then I'll also make the lines pretty definite and already broken up. So I am keeping the lines straight. I'm not doing any curves yet. You can start adding curves in, and we'll do that. I'll do a couple of these, and then I'll do a couple really complex curved shapes that we can start to copy. You can see there are some subtle little adjustments cut back in this one. And I would recommend, so this time, because we've got a more complex shape, what I'd do is I would work it a bit like a normal drawing where we look for the top and the bottom of our shape. So we end up with something that is pretty much the same height as our original shape. So we've got top, bottom marked in. Then we're going to look for this starting point, and we can look for using a measurement, an angled measurement, which we sometimes use. Can mark down something like that. I think will probably be our angled point. So what I did was I just took an angled measurement down. That's a little bit steep actually. So you can see I've used kind of compared across that angle down. It just seems too steep to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase that one, and then just make it a little bit more shallow, like that. So we're kind of using all possible tools in our toolbox to make sure we get as accurate a copy of this shape as possible. From there, we've now got this point we're fairly confident with, so we can just think how far out from that point is the edge of the shape. So the edge of the shape is there, this point here, we know we're going to have something like that's going to be that edge of the shape. So we can just kind of lightly sketch that in. When we're more confident, we'll make it darker. Then we're going to do the same thing here. So how far out along this line do we want this point to be? And then how high up? So we can plot that in there. Now this is a fairly technical way to go about copying the shape. You can just do it from eye and practice it that way. But I like to kind of vary how I'm practicing, my different approaches to copying a shape. You could sketch it in by eye and then correct using these methods. But sometimes it's useful, particularly when you're first starting a drawing, just to get a grip on it by just doing some kind of plotting your initial points with a bit more confidence using measurement. But don't get bogged down with it. It's a tricky kind of tightrope to walk. I don't like students to focus too much on relying on plotting, but equally I don't want them to kind of not have that as a way to kind of develop their drawings. So from there I can kind of work in a similar way to how we were working with those simpler shapes. I've got these main points blocked in, so I can do this bottom shape. Kind of work something like this. Just going to lightly sketch that in. So I'm working more by eye now. So I'm fairly happy with that. Can shade it in. And there you can see got that shape pretty much copied. So there are some differences, but it's not too drastic. And you don't want to take too long on them, so about that length of time is good. If you've got something more complex, we'll work on some, again, a kind of different, let's pick a different kind of complex shape. Again, we'll still use not quite as complex as the last one. I'll just go through this one a bit more quickly. I'll do this one more by eye. So just shade it in. So work this one a bit more like we were doing the others. So got one point there. Looking for the angles. How does this angle feel? Emphasize that now. See, I worked pretty quickly with that one. Didn't measure as much. It's turned out okay. So something like that for that one. And finally, I'm just going to have a look at what you can do with curved shapes. We'll just do one curved shape to finish off. Make it something like this. So one way to do a curved shape, actually I'll do two curved shapes and I'll kind of look at two different approaches. One way is to just work the way that we have been working and just do it by eye. You will find curves are harder to match. You want to work still ghosty even if you're working by eye. Curves are harder than straight lines to copy in this fashion. But again, it's a very good exercise if you are copying something a bit curvier. So it's not a bad copy just by eye, but you will find that kind of tricky. So let's have a look at a way that you could break down these sorts of curved shapes that you might set yourself. So one thing you can do is, if this is a starting point, you can think of the curve in straight lines. So let's take this curve and break it down and then just work the same way that we have been working. So we've got that point to that point. There. Then got our angle back down, which is straight. Again, you can maybe think of this as a 3-point or a 2-point change. So you've got this one coming back up, angling across, and then down. Another straight line. Onto here. This one's pretty almost a straight line, so what I would do with this one is I would just turn our straight line into a slight curve, kind of just swiveling my wrist. Find that. Down here somewhere. This one again, we can kind of look at how far apart are these 2 points, so something a little bit more of a technical trick. And this one we can maybe just break into a 2-line shift. Something like that. So we've turned it into something more rectilinear than it was, and we can go back to it being a curve. So then we use those points, that one's straight, to guide our curves. And there you can see we kind of both ended up curved again. So that's pretty much it for today. Just a little exercise that's really useful and quite fun. It's challenging, but not too kind of time consuming, and it doesn't take up too much energy. So it's a great thing to have as a, you know, every kind of spare minute you have in the day. If you practice these, you'll find your drawing and painting getting a lot better. But that's it. I'm going to upload a document to the course page for you to have a look through as well, which kind of actually goes through the tracing paper method, which is really useful when you're first starting out to check, because you might not be so good judging things by eye. But that's it. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next week. As always, click subscribe to follow our YouTube channel. And if you click the link, you can go through to the course website. You can sign up and get tuition from myself and a range of other tutors for a really reasonable price. So have a look at that, and I'll see you guys soon.